So I was speaking to a journalist about the math movement, and I was telling her about, what we've done and what I think is the best evidence of our effectiveness. And she's like, but don't you, you have to have data and you have to do, I'm like, well, we have a pre-test and we have a post-test and, we have a survey and we do this. But if you just read the essays from the kids, just why do you want to be a part of this program this summer? And you just read what they say, what the program has meant to them and what the effect it's had on them. To me, it's the most compelling evidence you can have when you have kids saying, look, this program means a lot to me. It's a place where I can be myself. It's a place where I can get support when I'm going through tough times. My grades have gone up. I went from, below state standards to proficient in 1 year. And then the next year I'm, advanced or something. And now I'm in the honors math class. I'm trying harder at school. I'm working harder. I'm taking notes more. I'm more persistent. They're just talking about that. They're volunteering that. And I think to me, that's like that's the most convincing evidence you can have. Somebody saying like, I would not be doing these things if it were not for this program. The journalist's response was, but isn't that all anecdotal? And so I kind of had a tricky time because here I am, the quantitative social scientist, having to say why I think actually in this context, the most compelling evidence is actually qualitative.
Yeah. So how do you make sense of this? So let me be more precise about my question. So let me tell you how I make sense of why there is this problem, and you tell me what you think. The way I make sense of how this problem actually emerges is that whenever you do something good for a kid, that kid is gonna show their improvement in a different way than another kid. Why? Because these different kids are different from each other. They have different constraints, they have different preferences. There's several reasons why they would be different from each other.
Yes.
Now, when you observe their behavior to be different from each other, and you have a hard time now to measure them in a way that is homogeneous, it's possible that you have instilled on every single kid some important improvement in their capacity to do hard things, let's say, but it will show up in one way for one kid, it will show up in another way for another kid. It's actually, you would be surprised if you don't find enough heterogeneity like that, right? Now, the concern, of course, is that as everything in statistics, there are patterns. And with patterns, you are able to measure certain things in a more aggregated way. But those things that you are able to measure in an aggregated way, there is no reason to truly think that those things, whenever they go up, if you look at two different policies and one thing is higher than the other, it means that the policy that goes higher will be better, because it's exactly what you just happen to measure, right? And there are many other things that are happening underneath, right?
Yes, exactly.
So, and that is sort of related to the issue of overfitting, right? Because effectively, so I was having this conversation with David, my former PhD student, about this. If you are to pick up an estimate, you like to use it more like as a forecast estimate to understand what should I do with this estimate afterwards, right? And it's entirely possible that the kinds of things that we report, they do not give us exactly what we want to do, right? Like for instance, if you get the beta hat of an estimate, the estimate of a given effect of a policy, of course, it is targeting some form of average effect, right? So imagine, so another thing that we were discussing in that conversation was, imagine that you are reading a paper and you want to figure out whether a given medicine works for you yourself. And you look at the summary stats of the paper, you see that, let's say, just simplify, let's say that you are your characteristics are identical to the average of the summer stats.
Yeah.
You're exactly the average. But then they go and estimate an average treatment effect there. What can you tell about whether, should you use that effect for you? Because
there's a lot of possibilities. There's a lot of DGPs that generate
some effects could be very positive, some effects could be negative, and then on average you will be that. Should you really take that medicine based on that? Of course, what a lot of people do in econometrics is that they may assume homogeneous treatment effects, which, as you know, is very unlikely to be true, right? So if you are to use such estimate, it's going to be really hard. So the claim that I make in that conversation was, I do not know a single paper that when I pick that estimate, I will use a linear operator of that estimate. Because, log of an average is not the same as the average of the log.
Yes, exactly.
So because of that, it almost like the only way that I could make sense of things, of compressed information like that, is if I really make a lot of assumptions about what is missed when I do the compression. And some assumptions are, of course, just not true. I mean, heterogeneous treatment effects, of course, exist. There's no way homogeneous treatment effects is true. The same way, going back to the point that this journalist was telling you, there's no way that the path of least resistance for every single student in the math movement will be identical.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
How on earth would that be true?
Yeah, exactly.
And yet there is information there. So that's the concern, right? And yet there is information in the patterns, right? So that's what
exactly.
It's hard to make
sense. It's not useless. It's not useless. It's just, given that heterogeneity, hearing qualitatively what changes people have experienced, I think is the most informative, right? It captures it the most in the richest fashion that I can think of. I mean, maybe someday when we have, a whole research arm of the program and there's, a way to measure like, eye movements during class or who knows what, right? There will be ways that we can capture more richness and more of that heterogeneity. But
this goes back, Dionissi, this goes back to conversations that we had in the past. Let me push back on the point that this captures the best information we have. This goes back to something you said back in the day. It doesn't, right? Because it's a brittle form of conveying the information, as in it is making a given axiomatic assumption, right? Which is, this is what matters or something like that. And then it's reporting the result, but it's never stepping back and reporting the result in a way that can convey that there are other ways to compress the information. It's almost like we are not providing enough compression awareness or something like that, right?
Well, it's how much is lost, right? It's not a lossless compression, right? There's a lot lost. There's all these different dimensions of which. So you think about the quantitative approach. It's like, okay, let's take a pre-test score, let's take a post-test score, right? So we run camp for 4 weeks. And we see how did test scores change, right? Average kid gets, 7 points more out of 25 questions. They get 7 more right at the end of 4. That's the median. Sorry, not the average, the median. Some kids go from 2 out of 25 to, I think this year we had somebody go from 2 to 24, something like that. And a couple like that, right? A couple that just had absolutely explosive growth, right? So that tells you a lot, right? It's not that that's useless. It's not that it's not useful. It is useful to know that. It's just, that's one dimension, right? That's the test scores. And that's right before and right after camp. It doesn't tell you what happens to them afterwards, what happens to them during the year, how they view themselves differently, how they think about camp, how they grow as a result of camp, and in what different dimensions they grow as a result of camp. And so that's why I say the qualitative stuff is so useful. But again, also, like you said, the qualitative stuff is just what they've kind of offered. We haven't even asked them, directly how much camp has changed them in this dimension, that dimension. It's also just kind of what they've picked out as being salient. So yeah, and the question is, if we start asking them specifically about, specific details, are they going to start telling us what we want to hear? Are they going to, be aware of that?
Yeah, there is potential for bias on that for sure. But it feels to me like I'm kind of in the middle here, right? Because if you ask me, what is the best possible way of doing a compression? My answer will probably be along the lines of the compression that we do in statistics, the classic compression that we tend to go after something more objective, right?
Yeah,
If we are to do only one compression, that's what I mean,
yeah,
then we better do that compression. Now, that is not the same as reporting results that are aware of the fact that we are inside a given compression when we go about doing that compression. Sure, we may be inside the very best compression one can come up with the amount of information that we have. But you see what I mean? The compression
yeah,
awareness
yeah,
is my problem. That's what I mean usually when I say epistemic humility, is the fact that people are just inside an axiom and they form that axiom in a brittle way. They don't have this light view of what if I thought differently? What if you come from a different perspective? And sure, if I am to be not epistemic humble,
yeah,
what is the best possible way of not being epistemic humble? It might be exactly this objective
yeah,
way that
yeah,
we're
yeah, yeah,
saying.
yeah.
I
That's
get the
fine.
point. I
It's
get that.
useful. It's not that it's useless, like, right? It's
But
useful.
that exactly, but that is not what we are talking about, right? The problem here is that there are blind spots in any possible way you go after reality. And
Yes.
sure, certain ways you go after reality, you're kind of, I'm simplifying things, I'm compressing
Yeah,
because I'm
yeah,
using
yeah,
words,
yeah,
but I'm
yeah,
simplifying things in saying that we're kind of minimizing the amount of blind spots that we
yeah,
come up with once you get after something like an average
yeah,
versus when I get after like a percentile,
yeah,
let's say, a specific percentile, the 95 percentile, something like that, right? Probably an average is an interesting measure of aggregation compared to most other measures of aggregation. The issue, though, is that we don't need to do only that, right? In order to go after reality, we can go after several alternative ways. Again, if I have extremely limited resources and I have to go only after one, I'll do that. But even if I have limited resources, as I'm reporting the results, I still can convey the assumptions I'm making. You see what I mean?
I
I
think
still
that's
can
right.
convey them.
I mean, I think one of the issues for me, though, is just thinking about the dimensionality of just how you characterize the situation. And it's something that to me is actually really compelling about ethnography and qualitative work. Again, so I have a co-author, Stephanie DeLuca, who's at Johns Hopkins, and I've heard her say that one of those strengths of qualitative work is you can ask these open-ended questions. And so it's not just, option A, B, or C that we as researchers come to bring to the situation. It might be option D, E, F, or some weird combination of those, or who knows what it's going to be. And so those blind spots can be avoided because of the fact that you get that kind of direct feedback of no, what's going on in my life, or what's salient to me, or what I think is really mattering here is some other issue that you might not even had in mind. And so I think that's a very powerful part of kind of qualitative research, ethnography. um, but yeah, I mean, I think the issue is also kind of like, what are you emphasizing? I think this is one of those things, like, like Sam Harris will talk about this in terms of news coverage, right? That there's just like an infinite number of ways you can approach any given. I mean, you could assemble, let's say, a 30-minute or a podcast, or you could assemble a 30-minute news segment, or even just a single news segment in infinite ways, right? So there's just the question of topic. Then there's the way that the lens you take on it, the details you give. There's so many degrees of freedom, right? There's so many degrees of freedom. And I think the same is true when you think about characterizing some of these programs. So you think about some intervention, and part of the reason for me, I tell people to come visit camp is because I feel like I have a really hard time explaining all the things that they'll see there, all the things that happen. It's like, well, it's a math camp. Yeah, it's a math camp. We do a lot of math, and we do, like everything. I mean, we do transfinite set theory. We do Cantor's diagonalization proof with high schoolers, right? We do infinite series with rising seventh graders. We do everything in between, right? Like all kinds of cool math, all kinds of fun math. We also do the basics, like the standard stuff you'd see in a standard curriculum. Everything, say, from fractions to calculus. But that's just, in some sense, that's just really like a part of it, right? It's much more about building a community and having a group of people that care about each other. So it's, I think some schools might say, or some camps might say, well, we're going to make sure that everybody respects everyone. And for us, it's like, well, that's like, if you're going to walk through the door, you're going to respect everyone. But actually, what we want from you guys, we want you guys to care about each other and like take care of each other, like really. And, there were kids, I mean, I see it every year. There's kids coming to camp. If you know what kids in Cleveland are dealing with, it's some pretty crazy stuff, like really crazy stuff. And so we had kids at camp this summer that, were dealing with those things. But then when they came to camp, they have a good time. They know that their friends are going to be there. They're going to give them smiles, give them hugs, and are just going to support them, whatever they're going through. So we had, a couple different incidents. And, a big deal is that we've had kids now that have been with us, high schoolers, that have been with us this was their 5th summer. And we have a group of them. And so it's just a very different conversation when you have that kind of a relationship over time, over years, as they've been growing up and they realize like, okay, Dr. D, he's giving me reasonable advice. He gave me reasonable advice when I was, a middle schooler year after year. And now that I'm a high schooler, I see he's also trying to give me good advice, or, wouldn't just ask me to do something just to try to control me or tell me what to do, but because he thinks it's good for me. So, hey, if he's asking a middle schooler, and my job is to help them, learn math this summer and be a part of camp and have fun here, I'm going to try to help that, right? So everybody's rowing in the same direction, everybody's on the same team, and it just creates a really different kind of environment than just kind of like such a, I think, kind of top down, like I'm the adult, do what I say because I'm here, and you're the kid, you're here. I mean, I think we would both say this. And you think about our own kids, but I'll just say from my life. I mean, I think anybody listening, I'm sure that at some point in your life, you had an adult responsible for you who was not cool, who did not necessarily have your best interest in mind, right? It might have been a coach, it might have been a teacher, it might have been any of those things, right? And so as you grow up, you need to figure out, okay, which of these people do I want to actually listen to? And who do I need to just like find a way to minimize their impact on my life, right? And hopefully it's just somebody that you're interacting with, a handful of times, but it might be your teacher for a semester, And so we don't teach kids in the math movement that you should just do what we say because we're older than you, or we have some position of authority, or we just have some title. The reason they should do what we say is because we've shown them that we care about them and we have a relationship with them. And, that respect and that trust is a two-way street. So, we trust them to do the right thing and we respect them the way that we would want to be respected ourselves. And so once you, I think, kind of approach things that way, it just creates a very different dynamic and also in a community atmosphere, right? When you do it in a community atmosphere where it's coming at them from like all different directions. It's coming at them from high schoolers. These are the middle schoolers, right? They're getting these, encouragement from high schoolers, from college students, from the old people like me. It just creates a very different environment, much more like a family. And I actually don't use that word to describe camp because I think I've just heard it too many times in, kind of corporate speak, like the whatever family. But a lot of our campers and our staff are returning high schoolers. They've used it in essays talking about how it just really feels like a family.
But this brings me, this I think raises an interesting question, which is, so you can think about, let's just simplify. Let's say that inside your own group of people, all your group of administrators inside the math movement, let's say that there's no, let's call no leakage whatsoever. Everybody's pointed in the same direction of the gradient. So you all agree what is your objective.
Yes.
But as you just suggested, your objective is not a single one. Your objective is going to be some form of weighted average of several different things, right? You are kind of trying to create a better citizen. You're trying to create a person who can do better abstraction thinking, several things at the same time, right?
Yes.
So let's just simplify. Let's just say that you give 20% weight on abstract thinking and 80% weight on citizenship. But of course, as you know, there's going to be several different objectives there. And the production function of maximizing one versus another, sometimes there's going to be some trade-offs there, right? So sometimes if you put more emphasis on being a good citizen, there may be some trade-off in terms of that specific kid to learn a little bit more math or something like that. There must be some trade-off at some point, at least at the individual level. The reason I'm asking you is that now you are thinking about different policies, right? Let's say that there's one intervention, let's call your intervention, math movement, and there's another intervention which has a different kind of objective, and therefore the overall implementation of that intervention is going to be very different. Yeah. So I've been doing research related to exactly that, because it turns out that what we just talked about, oftentimes when researchers go after causal inference, when they use different interventions and yet they call the same intervention, there's going to be a violation of the SUTVA assumption, right? The stable unit treatment value assumption. Yeah. And that
it matters. It matters a lot, it turns out.
What is a causal effect, it turns out, when you are thinking you are taking a pill, but in one experiment it's one kind of pill, in another experiment it's another kind of pill. What is the effect that you're measuring?
No, it becomes
when you look across.
It becomes
when you look across experiments, when you do some form of meta-analysis across all experiments, what are you really doing, right? It's really harder to make sense of things like that.
I was just going to say, for me, the best example of that is the Michael Sobel paper about moving to opportunity and interference in randomized trials, and just saying, essentially, the estimand, the causal effect, the treatment effect. The causal effect is not robust. It's not invariant to the realized randomization, So like who you end up giving the vouchers to, it actually defines the pill, right? That's essentially what you're saying, right? The pill is different.
That's right.
The pill is different. Right. And so, what are you even talking about? It becomes very tricky. So
but let me now close the gap, right? Because now here's the concern. Let's say that a person goes and reads a paper. Let's just, for the sake of argument, you go and write a paper and you are able to do an actual experiment of your intervention. But remember, your goal is like a bundle of goals, right? So you have this weighted average. Now, should I do your intervention or not? Should I send my kid to your camp or not? And now, my kid specifically, when I'm deciding on my own kid, I will put a certain weight on being a good citizen. I'll put some weight on abstraction of thought. And again, in each of the dimensions, it may or may not be in your objective function, right?
Yeah.
So the chances that I'm gonna be fully aligned with your objective is exactly zero, like probabilistic, right? So it's possible that an intervention that is exactly identical to yours, but instead of putting 20%, 80%, one that puts 21 and 79% or so on, would be better for me, right?
Yeah.
So, and for every single parent who's about to send their kid to a given intervention like that, those weights are individual weights.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And what I'm saying here is that even if the causal effect of an intervention related to being a better citizen on my kid is identical to the causal effect of being a better citizen on your kid, even if those were identical, in other words, even under homogeneous treatment effects across people, even under homogeneous treatment effects across people,
preferences.
Just the fact that I weight differently those effects and the effect of an intervention that is 21 versus 79 versus 20 and 80 will have different overall effects. After all, the effect of
Yeah.
just on a gradient fully on citizenship versus a gradient fully on abstraction of thought would lead
Yeah.
to completely different outcomes because there's
Yes.
heterogeneous effects, not across people now, but across types of treatment. You see?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what are we learning from a given intervention if you are a person using this average bundle effect to
Yeah.
make a
Yeah.
decision on their own? You better, if you are to report a paper like that, you better not do this compression of your objective. Don't pretend your objective is just one thing. No, show me your weights. Show me your weights as much as
So
possible. That's the point about ethnographic studies, right? Show me what the students talk about. Show me a lot of additional things. Because now, when I'm about to see whether I'm sending my kids to your camp or not, sure, I would look at this average effect, which is this form of aggregation effect, but I would like this additional information coming from ethnographic studies to understand, okay, the kinds of kids that decided to go to Dionisi's camp, what are the kinds of experiences they had? Imagine, for instance, if one of the kids says, I used to be shy, but now I'm no longer shy. And then I know that my son specifically is a shy kid. Now I'm thinking, oh, here's a match on a predetermined characteristic based on this specific ethnographic answer versus my kid. Maybe I'll put a little bit more weight on that kid's answer than on the average, you see? So again, the key point here is the problem about people dismissing ethnographic studies for me is the fact that part of the reason is this lack of compression awareness of showing the average. You need to, if everybody, perhaps everybody could agree on the fact that if you are forced to only show one thing, show the average. Sure, I'm good with that. If you're forced to just show one thing. But there is no reason to just show one thing here. In fact, there is a lot of positive value of showing this additional information, particularly for statistical decision theory, right? Particularly for what you do when you read a paper in terms of making an actual decision. Because oftentimes, what you want to make a decision is not going to be a linear operator of that average. It's just not going to be. It's going to be some kind of weird function of that average because your son is not similar to the average, or even if your son is similar to the average, like I said, we don't believe the average that you estimate is the same as the effect of the average person. It's not necessarily the same, right?
So everything you've said so far, I totally agree with, and I think these are all huge issues. But I think there's an additional issue, which is that on top of that, if you're going to be using one of these effects or even heterogeneous effects to be kind of forecasting, like you said, I think we're also assuming that the environment is stable, right? Yeah. And there's all kinds of reasons to think that. I mean, I can just give you the example for me. I spent years of my career trying to identify neighborhood effects. Put a lot of effort. Have a paper where we think we finally identified neighborhood effects, using this housing mobility program, moving to opportunity. We're really excited about it. And then, you start scratching under the hood and you start realizing, well, actually there were a lot of moving parts at that time. This was the mid to late 90s. And maybe early aughts, right? So, we had a lot, we had welfare reform. So a lot of people were entering the labor market, a lot of the people that were a part of the experiment. You had things like, I don't know what you would call, I don't know what they were exactly called at the time, but like enterprise zones, opportunity zone type investments in the neighborhoods. There was workforce development in the neighborhoods. There were interventions going on into public housing. So like Hope 6 was happening. There are just all these parts moving. You can think about education reform, all these things that you start thinking, well, what if that was an important kind of interaction with the program itself, and now we go and we try to replicate the program somewhere else, and that no longer is there, right? So like how, and I think, you can think about summer camps, you can think about, really any intervention, any treatment. is it really just a pill, right? When we're thinking about these social interventions, I think the pill itself changes, right? Like you might, I mean, I guess that's one way of saying it. I would say it a different way. I can say it a different way again, but I think it's part of the reason why I think just understanding mechanisms is so important, and why to me it's almost more honest to say, look, we have these mechanisms at play. We put them into an intervention or whatever. It's something that appeals to me about, for example, heterogeneous agents macro, where you're just, in some sense, I feel like you're being very honest about the mechanisms you're focusing on. And obviously, you're going to be missing important mechanisms. But the question is, you're kind of stating like, hey, this is my approximation to the truth. This is what I can give you. And if that is, a useful approximation to the truth, that's going to give us our prediction.
So when you say stability, and the example you gave is essentially you have an excess heterogeneity, right? The treatment effect is non-separable with certain features of the environment, things like that. This is just, if you model this in the most non-parametric possible way, this is essentially excess heterogeneity. You have a lot of heterogeneous effects, right? In ways that are hard to make sense. It's hard to compress, right? So now the concern about that is that, of course, sometimes you just have the signal to noise ratio is just too low. And the best you can do would be something like, again, going back to the idea of compression. If you are to do one compression only, maybe the average is the best information you can get, or maybe the median will be the best information you can get. Now, perhaps if you want to do a second, once you do the median and you want to get a second compression, then you can think about a different kind of compression or something like that. But unfortunately, I think in causal inference, we're still sort of crawling on this, because there is a group of people, I would call them mostly econometricians. They are extremely worried about potential concerns of heterogeneous effects. And oftentimes in more modern kinds of econometrics, they're measuring heterogeneous effect in a very non-parametric way. But when you look at empirical people doing causal inference, I think we're still very much interested in putting a lot more weight in internal validity versus external validity. And because of that, there is oftentimes, actually, there is a potential trade-off. In a world of full heterogeneous effect, there is unfortunately a trade-off there, where when you want to nail your identification strategy in terms of validity, you oftentimes will get into a variation that is fairly niche. And that would be not very informative to the original estimate that you wanted to target in the first place. Unless you make assumptions of homogeneous treatment effects, then you're done.
Well,
then it doesn't matter.
I mean, it's something where personally, I think, the whole reason that we like causal effects better than descriptive statistics is because we think they help us predict the future, right? I mean, because you can always, like, a lot of times descriptive work, I mean, obviously can matter a lot. Some of my favorite papers of my own, let alone in the literature, are descriptive, right? Because then you have to fit a causal model to that. But
you mean predict counterfactuals, right? You don't mean necessarily predict the future. Predict counterfactuals, right?
Yes, exactly. All of the above. But I think the point is, for me, at some point though, I think the literature in the field at times is so focused on identification that it ends up being a little bit backward looking, in the sense that it's like, okay, well, we have this causal effect. We've estimated it. Do we think we can make a prediction with it? Do we really, like, what are the contexts in which we can? And I mean, you've talked about this before. We've talked about this together, is, how do we have a cumulative science, right? Something that it's one study is building on the next, right? And I don't know. I think that's part of the issue, right? And that's why I think focusing on mechanisms for me is maybe one way of addressing that. But I don't know if you've found any thoughts on how to resolve that.
No, I'm honestly very positive on any attempt. So for instance, I wouldn't call mediation analysis a more honest approach than doing things in a more aggregated way. I am all in favor of all kinds of attempts, but I think we need to put our hands on the table. And our hands on the table is not quite what people who call themselves the identification police are doing. Hands on the table is to literally talk about all the assumptions, including assumptions that you were after. Like, for instance, we all think that whenever you are to do an experiment, we need to perhaps pre-register an experiment because we're afraid of people actually manipulating the data before. And yet, we don't do this pre-registration of target parameter in the first place, right? We don't do such a thing. Which, to be clear, I understand why we don't do that. I'm not even necessarily, we can enter in a discussion about whether one should pre-register experiments, because I think there's a trade-off that it's not obvious to me at all about that.
I agree.
I think the moment in a narrative of a paper, you can get by with calling bias a violation of internal validity, and you don't call bias a violation of external validity, the moment you can use words like that, and you essentially can relegate to the conclusion about whether your internally valid estimate tells in any shape or form something interesting about the causal question that your introduction wanted to ask in the first place, because that's usually what happens in most papers. You write an introduction making me very excited about the question you're about to answer. And then later in the paper, realize you did not quite answer the question your introduction told me you were about to answer. You did not.
How many presentations have you been to where you got disappointed and you said...
Maybe you did. You did based on extremely strong assumptions that you are not stating them. You did not state assumptions of homogeneity, of treatment effects, or maybe assumptions that are a little bit weaker than homogeneity of treatment effects, but you better state them. And again, or you just state the degree of uncertainty. This is what I mean by compression awareness. I think right now we have an incentive in academia. I'm talking specifically about, right now, these examples I'm giving, I'm talking specifically about causal inference in empirical papers, but I think it's in general. I have written, I have done some other work, and also have some videos on this kind of stuff too, related to science more broadly. I think we have a systematic bias in science to do some form of agreement among scientists that the world is more objective than it actually is. Because if we don't do that, we don't get our jobs. Just to get this point across more easily, let me talk about one of my papers, right? Let me say one of my papers.
Yeah.
I wrote a paper trying to estimate the causal effect of enrichment activities when the kid spends more hours in a day on enrichment activities, what happened to their cognitive and non-cognitive skills, okay?
Yeah.
So we're trying to understand the impact of being overscheduled, kids that are overscheduled. And anyway, in reality, it's not like I observe enrichment activity. I observe whether the kid spends time on playing the piano, coding lessons, whether the kid spends time on every single activity. And then I go and aggregate this notion of treatment, right? It turns out that our variation was quite broad, but let's say that for the sake of argument, our variation was pretty specific. Imagine if I were very precise in the way I would define the title of my paper. What is the causal effect of a boy playing the piano on Friday?
An extra 30 minutes or an extra hour per week or something.
With a bad teacher while playing, we're paying very little attention. Let's say that I have that exact variation and I go and describe precisely that variation.
Yeah.
Then nobody would ever read my paper, right?
And
because of that, because of an anticipation that nobody would read my paper, nobody would even publish my paper, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So now I have all the incentive in the world. And let's say that you write another paper about another kind of enrichment activity, maybe a girl doing coding lessons on a Wednesday, while paying a lot of attention, just to exaggerate, right?
Just
with a
to,
very good teacher, with a very good teacher.
Yes.
Now, you are estimating that effect, and again, you have zero incentive to define your treatment in the precise way.
Yeah.
Let's say that now you find extremely positive results, positive effect, and I find negative effect. So whenever both of us kind of titled our paper, what is the effect of enrichment activities?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So we're all pretending we are in the same literature. And in part, the reason why we're all pretending we are in the same literature is that if we are to tell the exact degree of subjectivity of my exact question, nobody wants to read my paper, because people in principle would like to read my paper because they want to get some information for a future potential decision. Should I send my kid to an enrichment activity or not? But they are not thinking, should I send my specific boy to a specific piano lesson with a bad teacher on Friday, assuming that my boy is not going to be paying attention? They're not going to be thinking necessarily about that. That's why they would never have read my paper. But now they will. They will, because I title enrichment activity.
Exactly. But I think this also gets to the issue of uncertainty, right? And the compression issue, because I think when you're trying to map, let's say, your estimate from that paper into my kid, and I'm trying to figure out, do I have my kid sit down and do some coding? Do I have them go play the piano, go play the violin? What should I have them? Should I have them go do gymnastics? Whatever that thing is, right? Your estimate is, again, like you said, it is the aggregate of a bunch of different activities, right? And so, okay, we're going with mechanisms, right? And we said that can be a useful thing, but I think people don't necessarily appreciate, this is kind of what you've been talking about, is maybe the amount of loss in that compression, right? This is enrichment activities. We're going to call these enrichment activities,
but now let me piggyback on.
That's a very.
Let me piggyback on what you're saying. Now, because of epistemic gatekeeping, because most likely my paper is going to be rejected in general, I need to do one form of compression. I need to do one form of compression to provide, let's say, precise estimates, or let's provide effects that are more generalizable. Instead, if there was no such epistemic gatekeeping, I would like to report heterogeneous effect along several dimensions, which many of those dimensions, the information might be useless, might be very noisy, but some of this information could be very informative, perhaps not for the editors, perhaps not for the kind of crowd that read the paper, but perhaps for
our knowledge,
for a potential user of that information in the future. And particularly, I say this in particular now because we don't know what is the form that we are going to obtain that kind of information in the future, right? It's possible that if I go and write in ChatGPT or in a future AI, maybe 20 years from now, I want to send my kids through something, or I want to take this pill. What should I do?
Yeah.
If we had as input in their training data papers with a lot more information without those compressions that we're talking about, and we can't right now because all the incentives in the world is for us to compress information. But if we had that kind of data, that would be an interesting input for the training data for AIs to actually fish the needle in the haystack,
the precise pill.
The needle in the haystack that would be relevant for me, depending on my prompt. And then when you do a different kind of prompt, they would probably get another piece of information from that same paper. But right now, those two pieces of information oftentimes are going to be muddled inside that average in ways that cannot be informative and could never be used in a future data training data.
And could steer us wrong in certain situations, could give us the wrong impression.
So again, my point is again, I would argue, at least I haven't thought enough about this, but if I were right now, if you put a gun on my head and say, tell me what would be the best possible form of compression if you were forced to do one, it would be probably what we already do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the point is a different one. The point here is that we now need to start understanding papers, perhaps, as not an end point necessarily. We need to start understanding papers in general as potential to become a training data. And
Yeah.
then the idea of compression that we're currently doing is not
Becomes very different.
like,
Yeah.
that's what I said before, is not compression aware. You are just pretending that everything that you're observing is exactly reality, when in fact, first of all, is a specific part of reality under a specific axiom. So if those axioms are wrong, it's also not true. I think most people understand that part, but it's also even a specific perspective. Like, for instance, we all know that we can estimate an average effect, we can estimate a quantile effect of a different quantile. And there will be different pieces of information, right? We all know that that matters in principle. But all the incentives do not go in the direction of reporting. Like, for instance, if I go and estimate an internally valid estimate, there's no way in hell I would put in the same paper, or if I have like an RDD or regressive distributed design or a very nice IV and so on, why would I actually show off also an IV condition on some controls or an RDD condition on several controls when I start getting a lot of noise and the referees are going to say, yeah, your paper is kind of noisy, right? No, I just narrow down to very specific kind of narratives about specific estimates that I get to estimate very clearly and very precisely. And there's nothing else I'm going to report. When in fact, ideally, I would like to report a lot more information if the goal is to maximize overall understanding of the world, not necessarily right now, but 20 years from now, right?
How much do you think, I don't want to say, I don't know if this is pushback or a counterpoint, but I'm just wondering, you said maybe this would be the ideal compression. And I think about, even for us, right? And you think about, okay, what do you know about the evidence on, question X, Y, or Z, right? I think about like neighborhood effects. Well, what do we know about, when have we seen this kind of variation, or what do we know about, I don't know, the scale, the scope, the congruity, whatever, the congruence, all these different things. I think it's hard to keep track of it all, right? Like there's so many different studies, there's so much data, and so in some sense, what you were just saying, it's like, okay, here's a very specific, another way you could think about it is we're just creating a simpler model, right? Of rather than thinking about, is piano the best thing for a 5-year-old boy versus an 8-year-old boy versus an 11-year-old boy, on Fridays versus Thursdays, all those different degrees of freedom, all those different dimensions, maybe we do have to kind of compress it just because of the fact that I don't want to say it's overwhelming, but yeah, it is, I think, for the human mind, right? And maybe what you're saying is maybe this allows for maybe large language models or AI or, just kind of computing power. Maybe they allow us to be a little bit more systematic in how we represent things. And so that, that memory is stored somewhere else, rather than just in our brains.
I think this speaks a lot to the trade-off related to interpretation, right? So the interpretation is costly for prediction, right? So if you try to create a loss function that only speaks to the criterion related to prediction, you do a lot better than if you put a loss function that you put some weight on prediction, but you also put some weight on whether a dumb being like human beings can interpret better, right? The issue is, and of course, this gap between us and human beings and AIs, and particularly with deep neural networks, this is going to be probably higher over time. At least that's my guess.
It's going to get worse. Yeah, it's going to get worse.
So the issue of interpretation here is concerning, right? Because right now you have this kind of gatekeepers that are currently being used. They're humans, which have requirements on their bandwidth. These are not only humans. These are extremely competent human beings, which are extremely valuable for society, which are currently the editors and also referees, but mostly the editors in this case. They are very competent human beings that currently are using a lot of their effort, usually very well-intentioned people. They are using a lot of their effort to help society, but in principle, they are limited. They are certainly limited, like
yeah,
any human being can be. So, and of course, the number of applications may go up over time. You may, at some point, even start using more AI. But the problem about using the current AI that we have is that it is using extremely biased training data. So that is
yeah,
concerning as well.
yeah. That's a huge
So,
deal.
because of the
Huge
issues we
problem.
just talked about, because the very training data that they are using, they are masking, they are overvaluing averages, they are
Yeah,
overvaluing those compressions, pretending the world that is not compressed is not as important. Exactly
yeah,
because of what the journalist said, because it is true that any one story there, it's fairly
yeah,
fragmented. One story is going to be very different from another story. And that's exactly how statistics, how large language models work. They will naturally see one kind of story there and they will see the rarity of it. They will see another story there, they will see another rarity of it. And it
yeah,
will be hard to collect a pattern to say, okay, this is the
yeah.
pattern overall. Because the overall pattern
Is
already is assuming
complicated.
compression, you
Yeah,
see? And
yeah,
the
yeah,
and the compression already misses the point.
yeah.
So I mean, it's extremely concerning here, but the key issue for me is exactly that we are not adapting fast enough to the fact that our research output will become input for AI and for aggregators of information. And we're not adapting fast enough. I mean, here in academia, right? We're not adapting fast enough to that problem. And
So
I do not know the solution to this problem except complete lack of gatekeeping. Again, this is something that I need to think a lot more about that, but I do not understand. So every time we put a gatekeeping, it's not only costly to create the bandwidth, but also the gatekeepers will not be a random sample of the population. So they will have a non-random sample of priors about what is
yeah,
right and what is wrong. And their priors, unless we find a way for them to be fully unbiased in ways that I don't even know how to do
it's
that,
yeah,
their priors will leak in their decision about whether something shows up for the rest of the public or not.
yeah,
And their priors, although it's probably, again, if I were to pick one prior, maybe I would pick the priors of editors like that. These people are good
yeah,
people. They,
yeah,
they
yeah,
know
yeah. And
what they're
they're
doing,
very
right?
sharp. Yeah,
If I were
exactly.
to
Yeah,
pick one, maybe I would pick those.
yeah.
But the problem here is that there are a lot
There's
of other
still
priors
people.
that are
Yeah, that's
relevant
right. That's
information for
right.
other
That's
people,
right.
you know?
So, I mean, I guess there's two things I would say in response. One is going to take us in a long conversation. I mean, the other thing though about the gatekeeping, if you get rid of gatekeeping altogether, though, there is a question of quality too, right? There's a question of quality, and I wonder if I'm going to go back to the other conversation, and this actually comes back to math camp, but I think there's this question of I mean, maybe we should be leaning more on large language models to be doing theory, because essentially the issue is we do need some compression, we do need some theory, some abstraction to be able to put our heads around what's going on, right? And so maybe what that means is when you think about the patterns that are possible, maybe the large language models can be a little bit more objective, or they can be trained to prune down the space of kind of explanations or DGPs or mechanisms. Because I guess, I'll tell you where this connects back to math camp. I was reading a lit review and it was talking about, I don't remember if it was in education or development. And, it was talking about, you know, just thinking about the space of low cost interventions. And as someone who, it just kind of made me realize when I think about the efforts that I've been a part of, they've kind of been high cost interventions, like all of them, in terms of, I'm thinking about things like in the US, like what do I think are things that have been exceptionally, effective? I'm thinking about things like the Harlem Children's Zone, the Promised Neighborhood Initiative to replicate that. I'm thinking about the math movement, other programs I've been a part of that I learned a lot from that I think are also high cost. I've done work in development. I'm thinking about groups like Partners in Health. I'm thinking about, there's a group I'm on the board of, Haiti Outreach. They're high cost interventions. Like, the people behind them have spent their lives on these things. They've devoted so much, they've given so much of themselves. And it's funny. Here's an analogy that I think kind of captures it. So I have a friend. We have friends that we're very close with, David and Cynthia Wintrick. So, at some point they were involved with a group called Tech Elevator. That was their company. Now they're working on food, chutney punch. So they're developing this line of kind of Indian spices, but now also sauces. But they're thinking a lot about food production, right? And they're thinking about agriculture. And, so David and I were talking, he was making the comment, something that you hear a lot, and this is an argument I've made too, right? Is, well, we couldn't feed the world based off of organic agricultural practices, right? Like we just couldn't, right? And that's like a fact, right? And he kind of makes the point. He's like, but that's because all of our research, all of our brain power, all of our energy has gone toward conventional agriculture and thinking about the better ways of doing that. He's like, if all of our research and all of our talent and all of our best brains and all of our energy was going towards, how could we actually make organic agriculture more efficient or, be able to grow more with it? I don't know. Over the past decades, like, would we be able to feed the world with it? Maybe. I don't know. But the point being, like, we haven't seen that space, right? That part of the space of interventions or that space of, and I think this is kind of the issue that you're talking about. And I think when I think about, these education or development interventions, I think a lot of the types of interventions that are more amenable to evaluation or publication, a lot of the times they are the lower cost interventions. And also everybody wants a low cost intervention, right? I want low cost interventions. Like obviously there's something very appealing about low cost interventions, but I also think that some of the more transformative, I'm thinking of also like El Sistema. I don't know if you're aware of that program from Venezuela. Like those kinds of interventions, I think they're high cost, but I think you get a lot out of them in return. And so the question is, how much of that space have we actually explored, right? Of those high cost interventions that, it might take you, years before you really start seeing the return on that investment. But once you do, it's amazing, right? And then there's the whole question of like, well, kind of how do you know it when you see it? How do you just differentiate, those kinds of interventions that, yeah, it's going to take some time, but eventually it'll pay off versus you can keep doing this as long as you want. Nothing's going to come of this, right? I don't know how you differentiate from those, one from the other. That's a very tricky question.
Yeah. So I think there's a connection between what you're saying and what we were saying before, because help me make sense of this connection more precisely. It's almost like what we're talking about here is similar to the issue in academia, that academia favors exploitation and not exploration. And part of the reason why it favors exploitation, it's because of, again, objectivity, right? Because imagine if I were to read your paper and I just change one assumption of yours and I do something good out of that change of assumption. That I literally build on the shoulders of giants, right? I literally, you are going to be my referee and you are going to most likely be favoring my paper because I'm citing you and I'm actually talking about your work and probably you will be able to understand almost everything in my paper. That means that next time you can actually write a paper in response to my paper. So you have a new working paper already lined up for you. And a graduate student of yours could be lining up to write a reply to my paper or build on another assumption that I made that he or she may not like it. Like, because everybody understood everything I wrote because I built on something that you and your peers have written.
Yes.
If I go and write a completely out of thin air paper,
yeah,
like who's going to be the referee of my paper, right? So there's going to be room for misunderstanding. One thing that I like in science, which is in doubt, I don't believe it.
yeah. We want to keep that. We want to keep
which
that.
is good.
We want to
But
keep that.
there are lots of room for that exploration not being incentivized in academia.
Yes.
And whenever you think about intervention, that is a bundle of several things. Think about the math movement like you're talking about.
Yeah.
You might randomly assign people in the math movement versus outside of the math movement. And therefore, you either have access to the full bundle or you don't have access to the full bundle. But
yeah.
Naturally, if you were to write a paper about that, the first criticism that your paper will receive is, talk to me about the mediation factors. Which of these elements that are inside your bundle that you intervene, which of the elements matter the most? And you, of course, have zero intervention across arms in that particular bundle. So you have nothing to say in that paper, right? So exactly interventions that are really out there, they're usually thinking
very different.
They're usually thinking about exactly that non-separability that we talked before, about the fact that if you incentivize a kid to learn math, that effect might be particularly higher if on top of that you have an environment without stress, right? So lower stress and good teachers probably do a much better job than low stress plus good teachers, right?
Yeah.
So there is this non-separability, there's this synergy effect. But if you add both of them, it's going to be harder for you to publish a paper because people will criticize you, like which of those two effects are there. And of course, I mean, of course, there's still room for you to publish a paper and so on. But you see what I mean? It's not.
It's much more difficult.
It's
You're swimming upstream.
It's a much less tight story, right? So naturally, whenever you are to intervene something in order to publish a paper, when you want to intervene something, you're going to talk about one element. And that element might be as objective as it gets. But it's going to be as objective as it gets, right? And the problem about forcing, again, it's very helpful. It could be, it's
a useful
I'm
thing
not
to
throwing
do.
any shade on this. This is good work.
Exercise. It's a useful
point
exercise.
The point here is that we don't also offer incentives towards the other side. And
it's the overemphasis. It's the overemphasis. It's not that this is a bad activity. This is our profession. We obviously agree with it, or we wouldn't be doing it. It's the overemphasis on that kind of approach rather than. I mean, I can give you examples with that. You think of.
Can I just end this point here by making the following statement? We really don't know. The key issue here for me is this. Let's look at those two papers. The paper that estimated the whole effect of one bundle, which is kind of a messy effect. Both of them are causal effect. Both of them did experiments, but one was a bundle,
implementation.
A bundle of intervention. The other was a simple intervention, right?
Yeah.
And perhaps that intervention was much less costly to do in an experiment. But let's say that now let's talk about several papers doing those single interventions versus one full paper doing the bundle. Let's compare that. We really don't know what is the value of. We cannot compare the overall value of those two papers in terms of providing real information for the future. Because in the future, let's say 20 years from now, if that study doing all this bundle reported enough information that were intermediary for a potential AI 20 years from now to match based on the specific prompt that I give about, these are my values, this is what I would like, this is how my household works. I usually have a very low stress environment, and I usually teach my kid this in my homeschooling environment, let's say. If I give a full prompt like that about my kid and whether that math teaching mode is a particularly useful mode for that, in principle, they could do a very good match there.
Yes.
which may provide me a lot of interesting information to fish on 20 years from now, let's say.
Yeah.
And it's not clear at all that the other ones would provide. I mean, it's possible that they would create useful information too, or even more useful information than the other one. But to sit ex ante in 2026 and state that for sure 10 works based on exploitation is more valuable than one work based on exploration. I'm holding constant here in terms of endogeneity. Let's say that we fix all the endogeneity problem. Sit ex ante a human being to say that, even if the human being has the very best prior one can have on. The fact is, you may be even very good at saying, yes, for the average person 20 years from now, these other 20 studies or 10 studies will be better than this one. But what about me, specifically, one other person? I want that information, and I'm not going to be served 20 years from now? Is that what you're telling me? Just because I was far away from the average person? This is, again, to say no to a paper to be out is, I don't think is the appropriate way. And if you tell me, oh, but we are not saying no, you can always put in the website. No. We all have an energy budget. We're all professors. We make money out of this whole system. We need to allocate our energy in publishing papers. If we create a system of publication with gatekeeping like that, we just don't spend time on this. That is the exact reason why I came up with this channel, because particularly questions that are multidisciplinary, there is just no scope to publish them in the world. No scope. No scope. Because they by definition will step on the toes of too many different people. You see?
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I mean, but I do think there is, and I think the explore exploit trade-off is a particularly useful one, or that decision, because I do think there is, when you think about gatekeeping, there is, I think maybe there's, so there's obviously the quality question. So anybody can now, cautiously turn on their computer, download a data set and start looking at it and, start firing off numbers. So that's an important thing. But the other thing that seems important to me is, there is a question of what should we pay more attention to, right? Like, what can we learn the most from, and for your kid to play the piano on Friday with a bad teacher, that only plays, whatever type of music, that's relevant to you. But in terms of understanding the broader, what is the most generalizable, or how do you think about that?
So this circles back to discussions that we had some time ago in the previous video we had, right? Which it relates a lot to the algorithm, right? Because whenever you don't have epistemic gatekeeping, there's going to be a flood of bad information too. So how do you separate the needle from the haystack, right?
Exactly.
This is just an incipient thought. This is some thought that I've been having this thought only in the last few weeks, but just go with me with that. I know that there's probably a lot of problems with that. It's just a simple thought yet. But what I would argue here is that we all know that the current algorithm is putting a lot more emphasis on things that involve system one thinking. We talked about that, right?
Yes.
It puts a lot more emphasis in amygdala kind of thinking. If people say something outrageous, everybody starts clicking on that video, and that video would probably be more watched, and probably whatever is being said about those videos, they're going to load more into the training data than if a person is trying to thinking seriously about this and then provide information that's kind of balanced with more nuance. But also, in doing so, they will feel more boring. So we all talked about that. But now, the key issue for me is this kind of research that you and I have done in the past related to feedback loop is very helpful here, because is it possible perhaps for us to invent an algorithm, or to at least start designing algorithms that are coherent dynamically? As in, let's think now about an algorithm that will change the training data, which in future is going to become easier to collect the needle from the haystack, simply because there will be more needles for a given amount of haystack. What I mean by that is this, is that we often think about this problem statically. For a given training data that we have, where there are so many people that have zero incentive whatsoever to provide needles. Needles here would be, say, system 2 thinking, right? And haystack would be, let's say, system 1 thinking. Let's say that, right? Let's just simplify it. We all know that there are a lot of system 1 thinking that is good, but they oftentimes, the good ones are the ones that hold up to system 2 thinking. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but let's just simplify. System 1 thinking would be, in general, the haystack. System 2 thinking would be the needle. Let's just simplify this. So what I mean here is, if you are rewarding people when they speak under their system 1 thinking, now you have more units of system 1 thinking in the training data, because people, like we talked about, people that do system 2 thinking are not in YouTube these days, or they are in YouTube only when they are under their system 1 thinking. Because when they are doing their like, they are being interviewed about something that they have thought about for the last 20 years. So that is still system 1 thinking. They are not really thinking aloud without knowing where it is going to go. No, right? That's it. Like, for instance, right now, I'm trying to do system 1 and system 2 thinking together, right? I'm having some intuition, but I have done enough research on my own to know that oftentimes my intuitions are wrong. So I'm saying that in a different way, but maybe there's some value there. Maybe there's something good here. So this is why I keep saying, right? But now the key point here is that we all know that an algorithm, whenever you reward certain things, those things tend to show up more in the world. That's what we are seeing. We're seeing more system 1 thinking. Now, and if you think about it, we have created some form of equilibrium. It's almost like, it's not necessarily coordination, but it's almost like all AIs, all systems are coordinating towards rewarding extreme views, rewarding system 1 thinking. Now, this goes back to our last conversation, right? This is why I think this idea of getting rid of the arms race of AI is a coherent approach, because the moment you get rid of the arms race of AI, that is the first moment where you can actually think about coordinating AI models. Because right now, like, if I create one AI model that tries to provide more needles, it's not enough for me to move the quote unquote needle, to move the needle. Not enough people are just gonna sort out of my AI model. They're gonna say, I don't care about your model. Your model is not giving us enough money, because people are not clicking enough in my videos anymore. People are not giving me enough money because of my advertising, so on. So now there's gonna be always room for another AI model to go along and keep under the current algorithm, because it does give more attention in the short run. It really will. That means the moment you come up with some form of way of stopping the arms race of AI, with something like a tax system of AI value added, and now you are under a situation where you can actually coordinate, you can actually reduce the growth rate of AI and start even thinking, okay, now let's think about what is the data, what is the training data what is the overall stable equilibrium that we think that is sustainable. Okay, that equilibrium will be an equilibrium where system 1 thinking would exist, but would be seen actually what it is, which is system 1 thinking that is not yet subject to system 2 thinking. So still very important information, but not necessarily as relevant as the information that got filtered through the system 2 thinking. How do we go there? We go there by creating a system, by coordinating algorithms to reward people during the time when they are doing more system 2 thinking. And then I'm going to spend more of my time doing more system 2 thinking, but not only me, everyone is going to. The same way with everybody is now more stupid in some way, right? Everybody's going to start doing a different reallocation of their energy and time.
No, it's going to be
because the
incentivized. It's
system
going to
will
be
be rewarded.
incentivized.
But there is no way to think dynamically about that. And of course, there's a reason why we don't even think about algorithms like that dynamically, because there's no way that there is
Get
a
it
causal
started.
effect. There's no way that there's a causal effect of a given AI model onto the whole zeitgeist.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
the causal effect of one AI model on the zeitgeist, if that AI model goes away from the social norm of providing what gives more clicks and so on, nobody sorts to that one because everybody still has access to the other
Can we
models.
Can we think about this more specifically? So obviously there's AI and there's, the algorithm and there's YouTube and all of this, or Spotify, wherever we're going to be hosted. But I'm thinking of, let's think about this concretely in terms of, I don't know, academic publishing. Let's just think about something like very specific, child development,
Okay.
right? So we are economists. And I'm just thinking about the fact, so I've interacted a little bit with epidemiologists, developmental psychologists, neuroscientists. It's a big world out there, right? There's lots of other people using other methods and other. So the question then is, how do you, if there's not kind of some kind of signaling with, say, university affiliations or professional societies or something like that, how do you focus attention? Like these are the big ideas. This is the big, how do you declare needles, I guess, is the question, right? Because in some sense that's the job of the gatekeepers, right? Like here are the needles. And we're saying, well, we've only looked in this part of the haystack, right? Like, so there's also this whole other part of the haystack. And so we're only finding the needles here. And like we've said, like that's a useful thing to do. But how do you incentivize looking in this broader space of possibilities, whether that's priors or interventions or whatever we want to think about that? How do you make like those findings or those, how do you make that salient, and how do you actually distinguish needles from hay, right? Like how do you show it without some kind of subjective, seal of approval of journal X, Y, or Z?
Okay, so my short answer is I do not know, and let's talk about that, okay? But let me say one thing that appears to be logically correct, that whatever approach we must do, it really cannot imply epistemic gatekeeping, right? Because epistemic gatekeeping, somebody in the middle telling me what should appear in the training data and what should not appear in the training data, whoever that person is, he or she must not have all information that could be relevant for a person 20 years from now who may want a specific information from a study that would have been published today, but that editor decides not to publish, right? So it's really hard to think logically about me or whoever is the editor, even the person with the best possible prior one can have in 2026, who is going to be capable of saying, I know for a fact that this information should not be in the real world 20 years from now, because that information will not be relevant. So I do understand that many of them, the problem about that is that there will be flat earther ideas out there. Exactly. I do understand the problem about that. I do understand that, but also we're also underestimating that 20 years from now, we will have better ways also to downweight the flat earther ideas too. Probably very good ways too. I mean, we don't know. The truth is, we do not know what the technology 20 years from now is, but we do know the kind of training data that we're creating. And the training data that we're creating is extremely biased towards a specific kind of compressions and not necessarily all the compressions that are real.
So could I mean, could this just be some kind of evolutionary algorithm? And I don't mean, isn't that actually, I think my cousin did a thesis on that, on sorry, on
No,
genetic algorithms.
I know
He
what
did,
you
there's
mean.
genetic algorithms, but I'm thinking about it, sorry, not in terms of genetic algorithms. I'm thinking about it in terms of the specific idea of genetic algorithms, but I'm thinking about it more in terms of for me, the two big things in evolution, right? It's random mutation
Mutation.
and
Yeah.
then natural selection, right? And so maybe that is actually the process, right? Because maybe that's the way you get an algorithm that dynamically, because I think your point is, look, let the flat earth ideas in there. They're going to fade away when you start realizing, when you get into a plane, when you involve gravity, when like those ideas will fade away if they are confronted with reality, right? And I think that's the point, right? Is have them confront
No,
reality in some way.
to be clear, I am concerned about that, right? I'm concerned that flat earther ideas would keep showing up still under this other scenario. I am concerned about that too. What I'm saying to you, this is why I do not know the answer to this question.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what I'm submitting to you is that whatever is the possible answer that we want in general in a society, it cannot mean an intermediate gatekeeping. It has
Yeah.
to mean extreme investment on providing training data that is as unbiased as possible,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then thinking about how can we create algorithms that will be coherent dynamically, would be how can we create algorithms that would reward the kinds of stuff in the data that we want it to show up, and like the the earth is sort of round,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and provide negative reward to the kinds of stuff that we don't want to show up in the world,
Yeah.
which are things like flat earthers or something like that, right? So the issue, though, is of course we're simplifying the world to talk about flat earthers versus not, but there
Yeah.
are cases that are complicated, like are vaccines good
Yeah.
or not? This
Yeah.
is something that is actually unfortunately complicated. There are
Yeah. Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
there are actually individual people where the answer for that question is no, it's not good. And of course, if you ask me, I would say that the evidence is very high that
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
almost all
On
compressions
average,
you can
for
come up,
most,
yeah, almost all compressions one can make, you will be positive.
and
But
and
there
and in
are
terms of the
certain
decision problem for
yeah,
each
but
individual,
there are
get it,
certain
just get it,
but
and
there
also
are
for the
certain
society.
compression. Unfortunately there are some
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
world is complex like that. There
Yeah.
are
No.
certain ways of looking. There are certain people with specific conditions where this is not a positive
Yeah.
answer
Yeah. Yeah.
for
No,
vaccine.
that's right.
So and in doing so, I mean, who are we now? Are we the kind of people that for the greater good we're gonna
Yeah. Yeah. Some kind of
make people die or something?
utilitarian.
That's
No, that's
crazy.
right. No, no,
That's
that's right.
exactly. It's like this is the issue. At some point, we need to understand. And again, we're still crawling on this. I think because the first the first step for me is to raise awareness, and that's what I mean by epistemic gatekeeping. Raise awareness that we need to be compression aware, as in
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
whatever you are gonna say, whatever I am gonna say, I am under a specific axiom. Otherwise, I cannot even make
You're
sense of anything.
making, yeah, yeah, you can only make conditional statements, and
Exactly.
you are within a framework to make any statement, you're within a framework. I guess
Yeah.
the question though is how do you, maybe something that would be useful. I'm thinking about my conversation with that journalist. And for us, that we've studied these models and these applications a lot, we immediately, well, those are different pills. Like those are not the same pill, right? Like I don't know, what kinds of examples would lend themselves to a quick illustration of, when you talk about raising awareness of this and making it something that's salient to people so they're aware of what it means. I think there's two things. One is giving really clear examples where it really helps people understand, oh, like those are I wonder if there's like nice assumptions or nice examples where you could say, hey, here's a data set or here's an intervention. And look, these are two very reasonable ways of interpreting these data. I don't know if Simpson's paradox would be an example or something. I don't know. But here's here's some reasonable ways of interpreting these data of this data set. And, one of them gives you this answer and one gives you something very different, right? And so I think examples like that to make it very clear to people that like, we're always interpreting, right? We're always interpreting. The data is there, but we're always interpreting it. And then I think there's the question of like, what is the alternative, right? Because I think part of the reason people do this, ourselves included, is because it's actionable, right? And I think there are these situations where it's like, I need your best answer, man, because I gotta go decide what do we do with interest rates,
So let's talk about that. So let's talk about that because we talked in the past about paradoxes, right? And I'm full of paradoxes in my own life. Here's one paradox that I've been thinking recently. I keep talking about the need to be compression aware or epistemic humility, this kind of thing. But that, to be able to say that so many times is just that I really think, why am I even saying this? I'm saying this because I genuinely think that idea is an objective idea. As in, I genuinely think that among most axioms one can come up with,
it's
I arrive at that conclusion, right? So this is a problem because the only reason why somebody would even venture to say something to another person is because he or she thinks this point is somewhat more objective. Otherwise, that person would just roll their eyes, and therefore I would not even state that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So imagine for instance, this goes back to I think our first video together. You mentioned the idea of what's the name of I keep forgetting the name of this person. The person who influenced MLK a lot.
Tolstoy
Gandhi. Gandhi. Yeah, but I was talking about Gandhi in particular. So imagine if I am a person, or just exaggerate, even Buddha, right? Let's say that a person with zero ego, so much understanding about the subjectivity of things, that they might say, you know what? Dionissi, you think the way you think, I think the way I think. I'm not going to influence you because there's no reason for me to influence you. After all, everybody is the way they are and so on. And I could just be on my own.
Let it be.
I would not be doing this video, right? I will not be talking about this whatsoever. Let it be. That person, let's just call it, right? That person is not effective because that person, because they have so little ego, because they are so aware of the subjectivity of things, that they're not even going to say things, because they are never under this kind of illusion that thing is more objective than perhaps it happened to be. So here am I making this kind of meta point, which is, don't hear me out too much, because probably I am in my most illusory possible way, my most egocentric possible way, because I am talking about something, pretending that thing I'm saying is more objective than probably happens to be. But that thing, the very thing I'm saying to you, is that things are not objective. So that's almost like an internal contradiction about what I'm saying. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So the reason I'm talking about this is that this is a fundamental paradox, because communication must happen among egotistical people. So communication must happen.
We're trying.
Communication must happen exactly among people, and while those people are being under this illusion of objectivity. And now this is where data comes from. Any training data will come from that kind of environment.
Yes.
So how do we design an AI system that fishes
through this,
the non-illusory part out of this? I know it's really complex, but again, the reason is everything I said is full of ambiguity, full of contradictions. But that's where I am right now. I am under this contradiction world. That's a paradox for me.
It's good. I think that's a good ending, man. I think that's good. I think that's perfect. That's good.
So the end is like, we suck. Don't listen
just
to us.
assholes. We're just a bunch of egotistical.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's good, man.
That's
It's
where
good.
we are. Yeah,
All
great.
right. Well,
Great as
we've
always.
gotten the.
Yeah,
Okay, I love it. I love, man. I love talking to you, man. It's great.
yeah.
Yeah, I will. I will take you up if you'll give me the time, sometime to talk through the thinking about math movement and where we are and our objectives.
Okay, so how about the next conversation? Let's talk about math movement. I would
cool?
love to talk more about that, to actually understand also how do you even think about this objective function we talked about, and
yeah.
you know, also for me to borrow some ideas for raising my kids. Also, sounds good.
Love it, Greg.
Talk later.
Have a good one, man. Thanks so much. See you, man.